Mm-hmm. Oh my God. I hope my dogs don't snore too loud. I usually have to stay muted. I have 3 laying next to me. They're
Oh, you have 3 dogs?
Well, we have 5, but they're 2 dogs.
Are some of them, are you fostering or are they all yours?
Oh, they are all ours. My husband
Were they fosters at first and then you couldn't let them go?
only one.
Oh, okay.
I fostered over 45 dogs. I kind of lost track. I only kept one of those, but the other ones.
Okay.
So.
Well, good for you, because that would be tough to let them go. I know it's the right thing to do, but.
Well, if they don't fit, they don't fit. Like I've had some that like don't understand socialization and they've literally like tried to headbutt my other dogs to get them to play.
Yeah.
And that dog definitely didn't stay. So.
Yeah.
But these guys are being very good right now and they're sleeping.
Doing their job. They're professional nappers, that's for sure.
It's just too loud. Why can't I see anything?
My dog is at daycare right now. Yesterday was supposed to be his daycare day, but he had a vet appointment, so he got to do a makeup daycare day.
What kind of dog do you have?
He is a big mutt. He's a rescue. He's like a lab shepherd and something else because he's a big dog. He's about 100-something pounds.
Wow.
So he kind of looks like he definitely looks like a black German Shepherd lab mix, but then he's very tall. So he might have like some Great Dane or something in him.
That's awesome. I would love to see.
Yeah, maybe I got a picture of him. His name is Zeke. And he's just and he loves puppies. So the daycare he's at has a lot of puppies. So he's the puppy master. Definitely. Let's see if I can find a picture of this boy. But he comes home and he is exhausted because he plays all day.
He just went on a Dexter, go downstairs.
Dexter.
That's my medium child. Go downstairs. Thank you. Oh, fine. 10 minutes. You get a 10-minute break. He finally asked to take a break instead of just hiding in his room. Children, I swear.
Well, here's a picture of him laying on the couch.
Oh, what a cutie.
Sleeping on, that's his butt. He loves that spot. Yeah. A big boy. Big feet.
Wow. Yeah, none of mine. My husband's dog is 75 pounds. He's a big guy, but the other ones are all under 40.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. If Zeke lays on the bed with us, you know he's there.
That's how Bob is too. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a beast.
Yep.
Whew. We just did I did like over 10,000 steps. We took my youngest one, my puppy. He's 3, but whatever. He's nuts. I did like over 10,000 steps. We went on a hike morel hunting on Sunday, and he was pretty chill at the end of the day, but not tired. He didn't sleep in the car or anything.
He was like, yeah, that was good.
I feel like he needs
a lot. Yeah, ours is like when he plays and he gets tired quickly, but he just doesn't want to stop playing. He'll just lay down and be like, oh, yeah, just keep coming. We have a lot of baby puppies in our neighborhood right now. I live in the 3rd ward and everybody's getting puppies and they're babies. And so he is like the ambassador of the neighborhood. All the new baby puppies, he meets them and he lays down and he lets them jump all over him, and then he helps socialize them.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, he's really good with puppies.
That's fantastic. That's how my boyfriend she is. Because my foster Fail, she came to us. She was only 9 months old, and she had like bugs and parasites and worms and all these things, and she couldn't walk.
Oh.
So when he first met her, he literally like army crawled on his belly, and then looked over on his back.
That's what Zeke does. Yep. He's like, every time he sees other dogs coming, he tries to get down as small as he can. He's like, see, I'm little.
Oh my God, that's the best. I love it.
Yep, he's a good boy.
That's fantastic.
Hey, ladies.
Hello. Oh, good morning. Good.
Oh my gosh, what a wacky little journey that just was. I've got an appraiser coming in to my listing in the 3rd ward, and so I was like, I'll go early and set up for launch here so I can be ready for their 11:30. And he called me a few minutes ago and said, I'm here, I'm early. So I'm sorry I'm a little late. I had to scramble.
We were talking about dogs, so
Yeah, we were talking about dogs. We're totally fine.
Awesome. I'm going to put in my earphones so it's easier to hear me. Is that on and working?
Wow, I can really hear you well.
Yeah. Love my little ear pods. They've really come in handy during this time of COVID. Who would have thought? All right. So I was all set up. There we go.
Just breathe. Just breathe.
You gotta
Cleansing breaths.
Real estate is just always happening. It's just always adapting. All right. Who's all here today? Awesome. Welcome. Beth, have I met you before?
Not in person.
Okay,
I don't think in person.
cool. Well, it's nice to meet you virtually.
Hi.
I got this.
I think
still get to have
everyone,
my-
is everyone else on here from the North Shore office pretty much?
I think so.
Yeah,
from North Shore.
I'm
Yeah.
North Shore, yeah. Because I'm from Lake Country, but I live downtown. So, but I grew up and raised my kids and family out there. So I'm kind of on both ends here.
Are you on Water Street?
I'm on Jefferson.
Oh, you're on
Jefferson and Menominee.
Nice. Cool. I am presently in the 3rd ward.
I know. Hi.
I'm usually off of Brady.
Oh, I love that
but I
too.
still get my Cream City brick background, so I thought that was fun.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. So I put out that survey yesterday on the launch group page on Facebook. If you're not in that group, definitely sign on. Make sure you're getting the updates on there. But what I was looking for was kind of an idea of what people are wanting to hear more about. And this could be a continuous conversation because there's a lot there, but there's so much to do in this top 5. How is everybody feeling about that? Like thumbs up, thumbs down, chat, like are you feeling like you're getting through some of those things? Does it feel like way too much? Are you not sure where to start? Are you stuck? Like where are people at with that at this point?
I'll say yes to all of that, just because there's so much to do. So it's like juggling over here, and then you drop that, and then you run over here, and now Bold is going on. So I'm like, oh no! And I my first Bold, so I don't know what to expect. So I don't want to overwhelm myself, so I can focus on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what I'll say is, I think that they can go hand in hand. I think the top 5, the purpose of the top 5 is to give you the 5 most important things that you should get accomplished while you're going through these first 5 transactions. And anytime you're feeling lost, these are the 5 things to go back to. Like these are your core standard things that you should always come back to. So if you're feeling a little lost or you're feeling like you don't really know where to focus, that's what you should always come back to. These are the like back to basics things. And I think a lot of what Bold is going to be touching on will very much tie into mostly the adding your people to command. So like building your database and reaching out to those people. But, you know, ultimately the goal is to get appointments, and you really want to be ready for those. And to be ready for those, you've got to have your listing presentation down, your buyer consultation down. You've got to know what a buyer agency agreement has in it, what it means, be able to get through that and get people to sign on. Being ready to do a CMA, those sorts of core like base things. Once you get people, you have to do something with them, and that's what those top 5 are for. So, Bold I think is going to help you build up your contact list, your people contacts. Figuring out how to stay in touch with people. But ultimately, once you have them, you want to have the confidence and the systems in place to be able to get them from, okay, they want to meet with me, yay, to let's get an accepted offer and let's get them all the way to closing. And that's the bigger hurdle, right? Like there's a lot of focus on getting new contacts and new business, which is super important. But if you don't have those things in place to get them to where they need to go once you are working with them, it doesn't really do you any good. So
Right.
I can tell you from experience, I've time and again, and my husband was laughing at me about this the other day, because if I can get somebody to sit down with me and talk about buying or selling their house, and this is especially true with buyers because I think they're more open to chatting, a little earlier than they're ready. Sellers, I think, are a little more standoffish in general. But if I can get somebody to sit down and say, I'm thinking of buying in the next year or two, I can guarantee you that unless something big happens, like a job loss or something, they're going to have an accepted offer within 2 months with me, because I know that buyer consultation. I know what questions to ask. I know how to read people. I know what information to provide them to make them feel empowered and ready to make a big decision like that. And every single time they're like, well, actually, could we just go out like once and just see some places? Yeah, sure. Like it just kind of builds and builds, and having that all set up and ready for them. It's not to like hoodwink them, but to say like, I know what you need. I have what you need. It's here all in place. I'm organized, in control. I know what's going on. You can see me as a resource. I'm confident about it. Let's go. And I think that is really pivotal to making that transition from like, yay, a person is talking to me, to like business.
Oh, crap.
Yeah. What do I do now? So I
Yeah.
think Bold is going to help you like get those people, but you've got to have those top 5 down so you know what the heck to do with them once you have them. And it's really best case for everybody to know that stuff, to practice that stuff before you get those people. Once you're working with real clients and customers, that is not the time to practice. So it's really, really important that you're writing a contract beforehand. You're writing an offer, you're reviewing it, you're writing a different offer, you're, checking all the documents, you're asking those questions, you're calling the helpline, you're coming to this, so that by the time you've got people, there's no time to wait for the helpline to review your offer after you write an offer for a real client. There's no time. The market's too fast right now. You just don't have that kind of time. So don't do that to your clients. Don't do that to your potential buyers. They're going to miss out. So having those top 5 down, I think, is really, really pivotal to being able to take, what you're learning in Bold, the new clients you're communicating with, the good stuff you're putting out there, and actually turn that into business and get them to their goals. And that's why we keep coming back to that. And it's all the boring stuff, and it's a lot of work, and it's overwhelming, and there's so many pieces that are start. And like, I have felt that way. I've come back to those things and felt that way. It's okay to feel that way, but ultimately you've got to start with those small bits. If anybody's read The One Thing, and if you haven't, you should, or listen to the podcast. But it's just one thing. It's one little domino. What's one thing I can do? And I highly encourage you to take one piece of those top 5 and focus on it for a week, and block out an hour, 2 hours, whatever time you have to really deep work on that for a week, and just make that your one thing that week. You're going to be able to get a lot more headway that way. I am a very ADD person. I'm super distractible. It's why I have so many systems in place. And for me, I have to force myself to focus on just one thing a week as like my major breakthrough big thing I have to do. And I do that for personal, and I do that for business. But if I start doing all the things I feel like I have to do and I know I need to do, and then all the things that come with having people under contract, I am just a spinning tornado of partially completed projects. Anybody else? I see Elizabeth laughing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's really key to give yourself some fences. Like, you've got to work on those 5 things. Do not work on all 5 at the same time. Absolutely do not. You'll be getting information. You'll be seeing ideas and hearing things from agents. If you're watching videos or going on the Facebook groups, or you're in Bold, you're going to end up with this huge list of stuff that you want to do all of it now. and perfectly. And if I could just get through all these things and not sleep for 5 days, then I'll be ready to do business. Like, it's just not realistic. And this is how it always goes. Like, this never stops. Like, this is what owning your own business and being in real estate is like. There's always projects to work on. There's always new things. There's always new ideas. Somebody's doing something amazing that I want to do. I have to put it on the back burner. I've got to reset my goals. If it's really necessary, I do that now and pick a new one thing maybe. But at the very least, I'm putting it aside and saying that's something that I see the benefit of, but it's not my top priority right now. I've got to get these basic things handled, updated, cleaned up, whatever it is, so I can best serve my clients. And ultimately, I have to come back to my why. Like, why am I doing this? It's to best serve as many people as I can. That's my why, is like, I'm here to be a resource, to guide people through, to be a great agent for them, because I feel like not every agent out there can serve them the best. And I know there's lots of great ones, but I want to be one of the great ones. So that's my goal, is like super great systems, really efficient, lots of personal touches. How can I do that the best way possible? And that means I have to have my systems in place. I've got to know my stuff. I've got to, be able to set those boundaries so I can reset and not burn out, because I'm no good to anybody if I'm burnt out. So anything I'm doing, I'm coming back to that why. And I think if you don't have that established, take some thinking time, some really serious, not distracted, no phone, nobody around you, half hour to an hour and a half, and just brainstorm what your big motivators are in all of this, and get some kind of statement together, something you can go back to. So when you're feeling super scattered, which is going to happen beyond the launch program, this is real estate. This is owning your own business. There's always 100 things you could be doing. So getting back to that why will help you feel more stable and in control, and able to say, I'm going to put that aside for now, or I'm appreciating this information, but I'm not going to take this and run with it right now. I'm going to table it. I'm going to add this to next quarter's goals, whatever it is. I'm focused on these important things right now, and then I'm going to get on to the next thing. Otherwise, you will never finish a project. You will always feel like you've got 1,000 balls in the air and none of them are complete. And that can be really draining. So I highly encourage you to, make sure you've got your motivation really clear. Make sure you've got your, if it helps to have a mission statement about the way you operate and what you're doing, and a vision of what's coming up, and then go back to those top 5. Okay, what of these things really can best serve my why in this moment? And it does not have to be like perfect and I'm never going to touch it again. Like your buyer consult, get it to the point where you're comfortable, get it to the point where you can do it confidently and in a reasonable amount of time. Test it on friends, family, other people in launch. Definitely practice with each other. On video, this is so easy to do now that you can give each other feedback. You're both learning. It's good practice. You're not practicing on a real, client or customer. And, get that to the point where you're feeling good about it, and know that, at some point I'll probably adjust this, or I'll have a page for this information, or I'll have a video that goes with this. Like, I'm always in process with that stuff, but I've got it to the point where I can have a great meeting with somebody, help them get the details they need, the information and the resources they need to feel confident to make those decisions to move forward. But I know at some point I'm going to go back and update my buyer book. I'm going to go back and add video. I'm going to go back and do all kinds of things, but it's not my top priority. Can I best serve my clients right now with this buyer consult the way it is? I can. Do I want it to be different? Do I want to update it? Do I want to add more? I do, but it's not a top priority. So know that this is always going to be the challenge. There's always something to do. There's so many layers to what we do. And then there's all the business stuff behind the scenes. It can be super overwhelming. And I think it's good to be aware of those things, but the people who really do this well have figured out how to prioritize and base everything on what their real drive is. And I think that's the key. So, and when you're lost, just go back to those top 5, even years from now. If you're like, things are weird, I don't feel like I'm on track, I just am like totally unfocused, go back to those top 5 things. There's probably a good chance that some of those things are a little off kilter, and you may need to just refocus those or refine them. So I think that's something that you can go back to well beyond this program, but definitely something to start with. So I think Bold's a great opportunity. I think it's definitely worth doing. I plan to do it as well. So, but I'm knowing in the back of my mind that I've got a lot of stuff going on right now in terms of business. And so I'm not going to just take everything and do it all right away. I want to take just some little nuggets. And that's really true for any conference, any book you read, any blog or video or podcast. Just take one little nugget that kind of ties in with what you're focusing on right now. Make some notes about what's coming up in the future, and try not to feel too overwhelmed by it, because there's all kinds of good stuff in there. It's just a matter of pulling what works best for you. So I saw somebody ask about, let me get on the chat here, asked about a video for a drip campaign. That would be, Heidi, a great question for the tech labs with Lindsay, and I don't know offhand if there's a video in the YouTube page yet, but that's something worth asking them about, definitely. So in terms of a CMA, and I think that's a good one to bring up today. We had 2 votes for that instead of 1, so we'll get back to the other stuff later. Elizabeth will get to listing contracts too, or listing presentations too. Admittedly, that is not my strongest thing that I do. It's not as streamlined and set up as I'd like it to be, but I'm always working on it.
Well, the reason I mentioned that is because Jackie actually reached out to me and asked if I had any experience with it. And I said, well, let's go through and see if there's anything set up, because she has a family member, I think it's her parents, that are selling. And she's like, I don't really know what to do. And I was like, well, here's some tools. Whatever you find, let me know, and maybe we can work on it together.
Yeah.
So I like working out stuff together.
Yeah, let's come back to that. And I'm not seeing it much right now, but I really, really encourage all of you to use the launch group page to reach out to each other, or to look for somebody who might be working on the same thing. That's its own little protected page, so that you're not out there with the masses. You're not out there with everybody from the office, maybe feeling a little more self-conscious about asking questions or putting yourself out there. This is our little protected group where we're all learning and growing together. And it's your chance to, utilize the help of each other. I think it's so key to build that community within our launch group. So definitely take the time to do that, and, practice through virtual meetings, and, send each other copies of what you're working on, get some feedback, just make a post and say, I'm working on this right now. How are you feeling about this? It's also a way where I can see, and Janine and Andy and Steph can see, if there's something that's coming up frequently, or people feel like they don't have a clear picture of what we're looking for or what you need to be doing. We can see that, and then we can chime in, or we can tailor, launch or productivity to those things. So the more openly we're communicating, the better this is going to work for everybody. So I really encourage you to get on there, use that page. It's not just for me to post about launch every Tuesday. There's not a whole lot on there right now, but I think it's a good resource to just jump on there and do it. So if you're not in there, text me or contact Mandy and we'll send you an invite. I I don't think my phone number's on that post. It's 414-534-7982. 534-7982. Just text me and I'll make sure I send you an invite to the group, but definitely could better utilize that to connect with each other. And like Elizabeth said, hey, we're working on the same thing. You know, just like when you're in school, right? You'd call your friend and be like, did you do that math equation? What the hell was that? Same thing. Like, I'm working on the listing presentation. I don't even know where to start. How are you approaching this? Oh, you saw, you know, maybe somebody watched a video in the, you know, KW website, or saw something on the YouTube page, and, you know, utilize each other as resources. We can all get a lot further together. Nobody gets to the top by themselves. Nobody. Like, I might be an independent agent, but I have a whole lot of people to thank for how my business has grown. So don't think that this is something you have to do solo, and really you're better off doing it together. If you were at the meeting on today, Charlie talked about the monkeys and their stress levels and how it was so much lower when they were with their buddies. Same thing. We're all buddies here to support each other and kind of help each other out. So make sure you're using that for that purpose. Yeah, so we'll get back to, my goal is that between Janine and I with productivity and launch, that we're going to be touching on all 5 of those things in one way or another, sometimes more of a detailed look, more specific, sometimes a little bit wider view. I think today, talking about market analysis, I want to go a little bit higher level, wider view, to give you some basics to start with so that you can then hone in. There's a few purposes for doing a market analysis, and I know we don't have enough time to go through all of them. So I want to just give you kind of an overview of something that I think will be a helpful way to start, and insight to how I do a market analysis, which everybody does a little differently. So again, that's why it's nice to kind of bounce ideas off each other. Also, you know, it's why when Janine does productivity, sometimes she and I touch on some of the same things, but in a little bit different way. And that's okay. The cool thing about this is everybody does this a little differently. You know, do what's genuine and unique to you, you know, within the parameters of being a professional and ethical and all those things. But there's different ways to approach this business and different parts of this business. And that's what's so cool about it. You got to find what works for you. If you're, you know, kind of posing and faking and trying to do what somebody else does, it's not going to feel right, and it's not going to come off as genuine, and people don't respond well to that. Have you ever noticed that? If somebody's like, you know, they get a job doing something and suddenly their Facebook picture is like their business card and it doesn't look like them, and they're like posting stuff and you're like, this doesn't sound like you, and it just kind of turns you off. Don't do that. Find what makes sense for you. Find your language. Find the way you approach this. Do not try to do your business exactly like me, or exactly like Jay, or exactly like Katie Falk. Find your voice. Find your way of doing it. You're going to find way more success, and it's going to be more comfortable and enjoyable if you do that. And the more you're interacting with each other and observing and seeing how different people do things and just appreciating it without feeling like you have to change everything you're doing, the better off you are. That mindset piece is going to come back again and again and again. It's really, really pivotal to your success, and it's a big challenge. So just remember, like, come back to your why, remember to be genuinely who you are, and then, you know, appreciate how other people do things, but don't feel like you have to copy it exactly. So in terms of market analysis, I'm not going to get into the technical parts of it as far as how to use MLS to do it. I'm just going to touch on the basics. I think it's important to understand the bigger picture of why are we doing this and how are we looking at market value. Right now, especially, that's a hot button issue with anybody who's gotten an updated tax assessment lately. I've had some clients reach out to me about market value and how that compares. I have a number of appraisals going on right now, presently in this very moment in this room. I have new listings coming up and some people who are holding off on listing, and I'm watching, you know, where the market is taking that, that market value of those properties. So there are a number of different things going on that may call for you to find out market value, or at least to track it. So, excuse me. Oh, my allergies are terrible. Anybody else? Whew.
Oh yeah.
Like one nice day and my eyes were like, so when it comes to the market value of a property, this is something I always bring up when I'm talking to home buyers in a buyer consultation, and when I'm talking to people who are selling their home, or people who are wondering about their equity, their value, thinking about down the line. We're all looking at the same things. And that when it comes to, sale value, or what a price should be, what price it should be listed at, what it will sell for, we are looking at 3 audiences. So first of all, we're looking at buyers. And buyers these days, especially if you're talking to somebody who hasn't been in the real estate market buying or selling in a while, is that buyers are really savvy now. They have access to Zillow records, they have access to city property records, they know what all the houses in their neighborhood have sold for, they know how long they were on the market, they're really savvy about that. So if they're really aggressively looking, they're gonna really know what's going on. So if you come out with some crazy price well above where it should be, just because you think, the market's going to support it, you may be way off course, because it's not just what they've sold for, but it's what buyers are expecting. Has anybody been out there enough to know, like right now, what's the buyer mentality when they look at a price? Are they offering less? Are they offering asking? Are they offering over? Have you been out there enough or observed what's happening with that?
I feel like they're asking at the listing price.
Anybody else seeing anything in there where they're
I've seen
looking?
Yeah, asking or shortly, like a little bit above and aggressive, because otherwise you're not going to win.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if they don't go above, then they're going to make sure they don't have contingencies to make it attractive.
Yep. Yeah, and I think if you saw what Charlie had posted earlier today with the numbers, and he'll be sending out that email, the list price versus purchase price, there was a significant difference for homes, especially homes under 350. And that is what I'm seeing. I'm in the market a lot right now, and we're seeing a lot of very aggressive offers. And it's a weird thing to explain to buyers, is that, it's listed at this price, but this isn't really the market value. This is a strategic, this is a response to what the market's doing. So it's being priced at this price, but that is not the price they expect to get for purchase price. They're expecting a higher purchase price because buyers out there, if they've been out there enough, they're going to know that most of the homes on the market are selling over asking. And so it's important to set their expectations, and it's important to set the expectations of your sellers. But this is not the kind of market where you're going to price a house and someone's going to offer a little less and you're going to go back and forth. You're going to get to the price where everybody's cool. That's not what's happening right now. Right now, especially in the under 350 market and even the under 500 market, we're seeing prices that are within the reasonable range, but on the low end. Offers coming in 5, 10, 20 over asking. They're appraising because that price is matching the actual value based on previous sales, but the pricing of the house is not the market value. And I think it's important to note that, because that wasn't true in the market when, my parents were buying and selling. It wasn't true in the market even like 7 years ago. But that's what's happening now. Super low inventory. People have figured out that if you can price it low enough to cause a frenzy and bring lots of buyers in, they will push the price up instead of the seller pushing the price up. And that changes the dynamic. So, when you're talking to people about purchasing a home and preparing them mentally and emotionally for that, and you're talking to sellers about pricing their properties, that's what's happening. And so we have to keep that in mind, that those buyer expectations and also the agent's expectations are that offers are going to come in over asking. So if you price your house too high, where it probably should sell, people think they need to offer more. And if they don't see it worth more, it's going to sit. So buyers are a big audience and they are educated. Their agents are the second audience. Agents who see a property that is a great value are going to be very motivated to try to get a buyer in there to take advantage of that opportunity. Every time I see something that's a great opportunity in terms of price versus what you're getting and what the market's doing, I am digging through my list to see who could take advantage of this because it's such a great opportunity. So if you price it well, you will have agents who will sell it for you. You know, if it's, especially if it's a great property, if it shows well, if it's been taken care of. So, you know, that's another resource for your sellers. But it's also something to keep in mind. If it's not convincing that this property is worth this price, you know, maybe the seller thinks that their neighbor's house isn't as good as theirs, and so they want to price it, you know, a little bit over, but in truth, it does not show as well. It smells like cat, and there's like a film over everything in the kitchen, and they don't want to pay to clean, and they aren't great cleaners, and you're not the one to clean. You know, like there's all of these other factors that you have to convince agents that it's worth that as well. And the third group is appraisers, because you can get an amazing offer accepted, but it needs to be reasonable within recent sales. Ultimately, you know, what I tell my buyers is that's kind of your safety net, right? Like the biggest battle is to get your offer accepted, you know, offering as aggressively as possible, limiting your contingencies, but having a great price is really the king, right? Like everybody wants the most money for their property. But at the end of the day, once your offer is accepted, we have to get through inspection and appraisal. And appraisal is looking at recent sales, ideally within the last 6 months. 3 to 4 months would be even better. If it's a condo, comps within the same building are ideal, at least one from a different building. And if it's a house, you're looking within that neighborhood, if the appraiser's familiar with the boundaries of that neighborhood, or within a few block radius. And you're looking at similar style of homes and size, not just square footage, but consider square footage, as well as number of bedrooms and bathrooms, you know, parking, does it have a finished basement, that kind of thing. So keeping in mind that that ultimately is like, that's the biggest hurdle to get through. You know, you want to attract multiple offers ideally, you want to get a great offer, but it's got to pass appraisal. So make sure that you are looking at those things. Thank you. Have a good day. From that standpoint as well. So make sure you're looking at recent sales, you're checking. The way I go about it is I'm not just checking what's currently happening and what has happened in the last 6 months. I might take that neighborhood and go back a year and see what the dollars per square foot were a year ago. And then I look at this year and see what the dollars per square foot are for what has recently sold in the area or in the neighborhood or the building. And I'm comparing like, what is the increase in value? And if you're looking at condos, some buildings sell for more per square foot than other buildings. This is one of the things I included in my analysis for this appraisal today, is that this building sells for more than other buildings. And I know that because I went back a year, I looked at those sales versus other sales in the area, and then I looked at the most recent sales versus other sales in the area. And though they've increased similarly, this has gone up a little more, and it's been higher dollars per square feet. So anytime you're setting up a price analysis for like a seller or even a buyer, if you have the time to do it, or, you know, kind of to familiarize yourself with the neighborhood, you don't want to just think about the activity in the market, but also past sales and how that's going to look to an appraiser. Ultimately, that's what they're looking at, is sold properties, not currently active, not necessarily even pending or with accepted offer. And if you think there's a reasonable explanation there, you can always put together a packet to give to the appraiser. It's why the appraiser just left me his business card so I can email it to him. They cannot be influenced by anybody. So, you know, you have to be really thoughtful about how you do that. And not every appraiser is going to accept your packet or look at it. But it's an opportunity for you to say, you know, just so you know, this is where we're coming from. This is what we use as our comparables. And also, just so that you don't miss anything, here's, we know you're busy. The guy that just came in has 6 appraisals today in one day, and then he's got to write all the reports. So just so you know, here's some important highlights about this property. Here's some important notes about updates that were made, some standout things versus the rest of the neighborhood, why I think this property is worth more than maybe that low comp I've got in there. Those little notes can be really insightful and helpful, and it's a really good exercise for you to do so that when you're talking to people about values, especially when you're in a listing presentation, you can come from a really educated standpoint to confidently say, I didn't just plug in your house to MLS and click CMA and see what pops up. I did this from 3 different angles, considering 3 different audiences. And so I have a very thorough view of what's happening in the market today and what happened a year ago and where we're trending and what it's likely to appraise for and what the demand is like. It's a much bigger project than just plugging in an MLS number and getting a response from MLS. So it takes some time. It really does. Yeah.
So let's say you have an appointment and this is your listing. Obviously, this is yours. So do you do all this, obviously, before you get to your listing appointment? Do you present that information, paper form, to your potential sellers and then use the same stuff for the appraiser?
So what I usually end up finding to be true, because there's typically about like a 2-week or so span between listing and appraisal, and maybe more like a 2-month span between initial listing presentation and appraisal, is that I typically find that I am going back into my CMA. Make sure you're saving that stuff too. You can save all that stuff you do in there, so you can easily go back to it. And then I'm updating it. I'm looking at, okay, what's happening right this moment? What has closed since we went on the market? What's pending? Is there anything I missed last time? But it's kind of an overview and update of it before I send it off. Because otherwise it's 2 months old and it may not be as applicable. So it's definitely good to go back and review that and not just send off the same copy to the appraiser. Some people print it out too. You know, you can be in the property when the appraiser's there unless they really don't want you there, which they can say. You know, I try to be sensitive to that too. Some are much more skittish about any sort of interaction, and others are like, yeah, sure, I'll take it, whatever. Because you can be there in the property and say like, yeah, you know, just kind of casually, like, I really love that they updated this, or yeah, you know, I saw the one down the street and looks great in pictures, but it's just not the same in person. And like, you can kind of put in your little 2 cents here and there, can help. And also just being like, hey, I'm a reasonable person. You know, if you need info, but I respect that you know what you're doing, and you get their contact information, like it's worth doing that. In terms of the listing presentation, I think for me, it depends on whether this is someone I sold the home to and have been in touch with regularly, or if this is like a brand new person I've never worked with before, property I haven't been in or sold before. If it's a new one, then I'm coming at it from all those angles. I'm putting together a list in MLS, and I don't actually send people a CMA. I think it's confusing without someone there to interpret it. So what I typically will do is I will send myself the public view of, you know, 4 to 6 listings. If I feel like it's insightful, I might go up to like 10. More than that is overwhelming for people. I'll send that to myself. And then I go to the presentation and I bring a statistical analysis of the CMA and I'll have the map with all the addresses and the dots and things, and then just the side by side. So I don't print out every sheet, because who's going to sit there and look at every sheet without having pictures, right? Do you guys shop by looking at paper and not looking at the pictures? Is the first thing you look at on MLS the pictures? Yeah, right? And pictures on paper stink. They're worth nothing. So what I will do is I'll bring the overview. I'll kind of have my notes of like, this house is a house I saw, you know, plus it has an extra parking spot. Negative, it has kind of a crappy backyard. All those different pieces that are just my little notes. And I'll have that for them. And then after we meet, or potentially before we meet, depending on how the conversation went ahead of time and who I'm working with, then I will send that link, that MLS link, either ahead of time so they have a chance to review, or following the meeting, depending on where we are in that process. And that gives them a chance to actually look at the pictures, get a little bit better view of what a buyer's seeing. We talk about, hey, this is going to be what a buyer sees by comparison. They've probably seen these listings. They're going to look at yours. We talk a little bit about how great photos make a difference, how not so great photos make a difference. You know, how it kind of ties into my marketing plan and how that works for them too. So everybody does this differently. I personally, my listing presentation, my buyer consultations are both very conversational. I don't know if Peter's on here, but he sat in on one with me. I don't think he is. He's a busy guy these days. But he sat in on one with me, and it's very different from any that I've sat in on before. It's very conversational. It's very dependent on what's important to the seller. They kind of guide the conversation. I have all of my stuff prepared, but I'm not necessarily like pushing through everything on my list that I feel like I need to tell them. I just have it ready so that if they want to talk about that, we talk about that. You know, I have like a general outline of the conversation, but we may spend more time on something that's more important to them and less time on something else. So I don't necessarily come in with that agenda that I'm going to go through every bit of my market analysis, because for them, that might not be top priority. And that's just, for me, that's important to how I read people and respond. I was a teacher. This is the background I come from. You don't go to a student and say, we're going to get through these 5 things because I need to get through these 5 things. You figure out what they don't know, what they're struggling with, what they're, you know, what they're anxious about, and you focus on those things and help work them through it. So that's how I approach working with clients too. And it's totally different. Other people have like a very specific set of things they do. They touch on things, they've got it, you know, they've got their scripts, they've got it down to a science, and it works great. So you have to figure out what works best for you. Yeah. And then in terms of what I give an appraiser, I usually am taking just that same list. I like to send it from MLS because I can tell if they opened it or not. And right in the email, I just add some notes. So I may say like, you know, this address is one I saw and it didn't look as good as it did in the pictures. It had this, that, or the other thing. You know, this one, you know, this building by comparison sells higher than others in the area. So that's why I pulled these from last year. So kind of explaining where I'm coming from to show that it was a thoughtful analysis. Be mindful to not just put a bunch of properties that are more than the value of the one you're analyzing. That's like real obvious that you're just avoiding the ones that are less. Like there's going to be some that are less, and that's okay. You know, it's important to look at all of those things, because otherwise they're going to find a low one and be like, oh, they didn't mention these 3 properties that are 50 grand less. You know, are they just avoiding them? Are they, you know, so you can address those too. And that's okay. You know, the market itself changes so often too. The more informed you are about the activities, like every Tuesday that Charlie's giving us these stats, you can say like, I know that a month ago, you know, showings were down and numbers were lower by this percentage. And so even though it's not been that long, we've been in a tumultuous time. This is why this property sold for less. This is why this should sell for more. the better informed you are about what's happening in the market, the better you can explain that to buyers, sellers, listers, people who are listing, appraisers. And you don't even have to do the digging. You just show up for Tuesday meeting and Charlie talks through all of it. So awesome. So I think it's worth going back to Tuesday meetings too and just get some information on what's happening in terms of trends. Yeah, it's a lot to do. A market analysis takes a while. I think Jay said he takes 2 hours to do a CMA. I take a while. It is not a quick thing. If I need to do something in a pinch, if I know the neighborhood, which I'm in a lot of areas, but I'm in those areas a lot, so I can off the cuff say like, I think this is priced well or it's not. But ultimately, I always like to look and see like what the evidence is, because we're going to have to get to that point of appraisal, and they're really looking at what's sold and very black and white by comparison to buyers and agents. So it's worth taking the time to do, and it's why it's worth doing practice in advance ones, because otherwise it's going to feel overwhelming when you have to do it for a real, a property you're listing, a client you're working with, an appraiser you're preparing for. So kind of get your system down, figure out what works for you, familiarize yourself with what's in MLS. There's a whole bunch of stuff I can do in MLS that I still don't know because I didn't take the time to do it. So kind of figure out what works for you and have a little system in place and know what your goal is. Like, what am I printing? What do I have to give these people? How many properties do I need or want to have as comparables? And don't get too sucked into the looking at pictures and then, falling down the rabbit hole and then forgetting what you were doing. Like, give yourself a time limit, give yourself an end goal. This is what this should look like when I'm done. And then work backwards. Okay, so if this is what this should look like, what do I need to put together to get there? And then realistically, you can get that done within your time frame, and you can speak to it in an informed way when you're talking to a client, a potential buyer, an agent who has an interested person. All those things you're going to be asked to justify. So it's good to be prepared to explain.
So Amanda, do you like exclusively do your CMAs on MLS, or do you use the RPR, or does it depend?
I don't use RPR much. It's one of those things that's on my back burner list that I barely touched on in my first couple of years, and then I got away from it. I used something called Moxie when I was at Coldwell Banker, and I that was right around the time I was looking at RPR, and I was like, oh, I like Moxie. I'll start using that for stuff. So right now I just use MLS. It kind of feels like clunky and old and like a little boring. It's not as flashy as our sweet app and our sweet websites, but I like how much detail I can get out of MLS, how many stats I can get. And I appreciate numbers, but I'm not the person who's like putting together everything in number form. I'm way more of a like a feeling, emotional, like what am I seeing and experiencing rather than what the numbers say. But I know I need numbers to back that up. So I usually go to MLS for that.
Okay. Well, my challenge is I have a potential listing, but it's way out in Sullivan, and it's really hard to find any comparables. And when I went on MLS and tried to do a CMA, it just wasn't pulling in like very good comparables. And when I went on RPR, I felt like I got better comparables. So
cool.
I'm just going to kind of use that, I guess.
Yeah, when I'm going into MLS to find comparables, I almost never do the plug in the MLS number and click CMA, because I don't get good results. I don't get a good overview. MLS doesn't know neighborhood boundaries. It's just not great. So I typically will I know neighborhoods well enough that I can pull out the boundaries out of my head.
Like a radius search?
Yeah, I'll do a radius search, or I oftentimes do the polygram. Is that the word?
The shape, yeah.
The shape, the make your own shape. And I'll, I know within a neighborhood like Washington Heights, like the boundary is North Avenue. I'm not going past North Avenue. I'm not going past 175. I'm not going south of Milwaukee Avenue. I'm not going west of 60th Street. I know where the boundaries are from being out there. If you're not sure, try to stay within a 3 to 4 block radius. And if you see a trend of, you know, oh, on that side of the street, there's like a whole bunch of places that are way less expensive or way more expensive, you probably crossed a border of some sort. It doesn't mean an appraiser won't use those. Like an appraiser probably won't use Wauwatosa as a comp for a Milwaukee property. But if they don't know the Washington Heights boundaries, they might use a Washington Heights comp for an uptown property.
Yeah.
So, and that can happen. So it's good to just be aware and prepared. And if you know, like, I know the Heights, I'm not going to use uptown as a comp, then when I'm preparing something for the appraiser, I'm including that information in not like a know-it-all pushy way, but like,
This is how I did this.
Hey, this is how I did this. And I,
Mhm.
I know this neighborhood, and historically the comps are lower north and North Avenue because that's a different neighborhood. And so this is why I pulled from here.
Yeah, I think it's
and
tricky because it's so rural out there instead of like,
Yeah, you have to
city.
go way further out.
I had to
when
go
you're
10
rural.
miles out.
Yep. You're going miles rather than blocks.
Right.
And you're really looking for a comparison of acreage,
Property. Yeah.
buildings, like how many buildings there are. The style of home doesn't come as much into play as the size and the age of it. So you're the other piece of home value that I always talk about with buyers and sellers is that there are 3 major things that determine price, and it's location, obviously, and that's not just municipality, it's not just school district. It could also be, is it on a corner? Is it on a private lot? Is it on a lake? Is it next to an apartment building? And then size, so location, size, which can be your square footage, could be your acreage, it could be the parking situation, could be the number of buildings you've got. Number of bedrooms and bathrooms is a big one for appraisers. The living space, finished basement space, all of that falls into size. And then condition and features are together. So condition, whether it's updated, whether the outside needs an overhaul, whether it has, original woodwork. That's an older thing, but it's a beautiful thing. So that condition, and then features like fireplace, deck, dog run, barn, she shed, all that stuff comes into play. So when I'm talking to people about what they're looking for in a home, when I'm talking to people about whether a home is a good fit for them, when I'm talking to people about their budget and what they can afford and what's out there, and when I'm talking to people about selling their home and how it compares to others, that's what we go back to. So we've got 3 audiences, and we've got 3 main things that are determining those values. So when you're looking rural, you're looking at those in a little different way than you would in an urban area or a suburb.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So with that listing that I have with my parents, when they bought the house, it was listed as a 4-bedroom, but the upstairs wasn't done yet. It had like the space for the 2 rooms, but you had to walk through like a dirty, dusty attic to get to it, and it wasn't done. But they listed it as a 4-bedroom, and then the square footage it said was 1,300 something. And I'm wondering if they included those 2 bedrooms upstairs, or they included the unfinished attic part as part of the square footage. And how do I go about getting like the updated square footage now?
That's a good question, Jackie. So when it comes to square footage, I usually check the tax records, because the last person who listed it may have said a total of 1,500 square feet, when in reality it's 1,200 above grade and 300 below grade. So I like to check the tax records, because that can often have a more accurate count of square footage. You can find out if they have an appraisal from a previous purchase, sale, refinance. Appraisers should be measuring rooms. The guy that was here today was like wheeling around his little measurer. Finding out if you have a previous appraisal can be helpful too. If you can't find anything that seems accurate, we should be measuring rooms for the listing. So if you need to go in and measure all the finished living spaces above grade and see if it seems to match up or if it's off, I mean, you're going to be within a range. The thing to consider is when it comes to below grade, appraisers are the way an appraiser looks at below grade space, even if you have an egress window, is different than they look at above grade space. So, if you have a bedroom with an egress window, that could be counted, but they might count it a little bit less than they would a bedroom above grade. And if you've got a full bath down there, that's not part of that egress window space, they may not count it at all. They may count it for significantly less. There's a lot less value in anything below grade. So be careful with that. I think from an advertising marketing standpoint, I would count it, but I would just keep in mind from a pricing standpoint and from an appraisal standpoint that could be a little sticky down the road. And, if your seller wants to be aggressive with price and you get a great offer, it's just important to set their expectations and say, remember, we talked about those 3 audiences. Our biggest hurdle is going to be appraisal. We just need to be ready for it. There's a chance it could come in lower. We talked about the price that is like what you need to get, what you'd love to get. We're in a really good spot right now, but let's keep in mind there's a chance we're going to come in below that. And let's just be ready. Like, there's no need to worry right now. We've done all we can. I'm, doing all I can to justify where we're coming from a price standpoint, but let's just be prepared that might come up, and we're a team and we'll work through it. That way they're not like completely blindsided by appraisal when it comes to that, just making sure they're aware of how that is looked at, I think is important too. So yeah, with that attic space, they may have counted it, just that room. And the way
now it's all finished up there. Everything is
okay,
like
nice.
There's a living room, bedrooms, bathroom, and everything that wasn't there before.
Yeah, so you'll probably have it may make sense for them to have an appraisal done. I mean, it costs money to do that, so they might not want to, but also if you are estimating, just make sure that you've got that noted in your private remarks that they're estimates. Yeah, so it's the way that we can advertise a space as a bedroom or like living space is a little bit more flexible. But just know that it's got to deliver, right? Like, they have to see it in person and believe that that's a bedroom. And sometimes that's a real disappointment. So that doesn't help. And when it comes to an appraiser, are they going to call that a bedroom or not? And so just keeping those things in mind. Like, I had a space that was a great like guest room office area, but it didn't have a door on it. So before we even put it on the market, we made sure they put a door on it, and that way there's no argument that that's not a bedroom. And we made sure the closet was a legit closet and stuff like that. So you can proactively do some things too.
Yeah, the listing when my parents bought it, it says it was an expandable 4-bedroom, but the 2 bedrooms in the attic, like, you wouldn't be able to live in those. It was disgusting.
That's a great marketing word. Expandable, potential.
Yes. So what happens if you have a property and it's listed at whatever price, but the appraisal comes back at much lower? That means that buyer is either going to have to come to the table with more money if they really want it, or they can walk.
Yeah, so it depends. I'll try to do a quick overview of the appraisal contingency before we're done. But so in terms of a lender's perspective, they order the appraisal, they have the appraisal done to ensure the property is worth at least what they're lending the buyer. So that's after down payment. So that could be 90% of value if their down payment is 10%. When it comes to appraisal contingency, they're using the same appraisal report, but we're looking purely at purchase price. Now, some lenders, depending on how their program's set up, it might be more than just the loan amount. It may, because of how their down payment's set up, there might be a dollar amount over that you've got to hit, where the buyer can still get the appraisal and not have to bring money to the table. But if it affects their percentage of down payment or the program that they're working with, they may have to bring some money to the table if the seller doesn't agree to a price change. But it's possible that the lender would be satisfied, but the appraised value could come in under purchase price. And that's why the appraisal contingency exists. So sometimes an appraisal contingency is not included to give the seller some peace of mind. It's a risk to the buyer that they're kind of risking basically their down payment. But if they have it, then yes, you'd go to back to the negotiating table, try to get the seller to agree to the price at appraised value. Or what I see more often, and this happens every spring when we're transitioning from winter activity and prices to spring, those first few closings I have that came under contract in January and February, very often we see a lower appraisal. It's just because the comps they're looking at are from a lower price point in the winter. So if that happens, very often we're meeting in the middle, because we're all, and again, I'm setting those expectations for my buyers or my sellers. Hey, we're looking backwards for the appraisal, but we all know the market's different right now. And so there's a chance it's going to come in low, but we need to recognize that what it appraises for is based on what recently sold. And there's, present market, if we go 3 months in the future, this is worth more than that. So we're likely to meet somewhere in the middle. So I think just preparing people for that is important, and knowing what the heck the appraisal contingency is and means versus the appraisal within the financing contingency. And you will find if you try to make an aggressive offer and not include appraisal contingency, there are agents out there who don't understand that it's different from the loan appraisal and what it's looking at and how that works within the offer. So just be mindful about how you're utilizing that, including it or not, and make sure your buyers are familiar with what that means too, because that gets a little confusing for people sometimes. All right. Anybody have anything else? Last bits about CMAs, market analysis, market value? Yeah.
Just like how into detail should we be getting with our clients about the CMA? Like, should we be telling them everything that we're finding and everything that we're seeing? Should we be really open with them about that? Or is it something that we kind of like do on our own and kind of just bring what we found in a gist?
Yeah, I think it's very easy for people to get overwhelmed. So information overload is ineffective. You may have a client who is a numbers person and they want to know, and you should be able to read that, kind of based on how they respond to things. It's one of the reasons I think it's good to do a phone call before you show up for a listing presentation. It's one of the reasons I do things like send out a brainstorming page to my buyers before I meet with them, because if they fill it out, send it back to me, make their own spreadsheet, stuff like that, I learned so much about how they operate from that I know how to approach our meeting. And I think you can ask some questions previous to a listing presentation to get an idea for that too. So if they're really numbers people, then like know your stuff and be prepared to go in depth with that. If they are not numbers people, you're gonna totally overwhelm them. And it shouldn't take an in-depth look at something to show what you need to show. Again, go back to like, what's the end result we're going for? What's our goal here? Overview should suffice for most people, but be prepared to have somebody ask some detailed questions and want more information. So do the work on the back end and then be the filter for them to be able to present something much clearer, less overwhelming, the bullet points, the Cliff's notes, and then just be ready if they have other questions or want to go more in depth. But a lot of people don't.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for coming. I really appreciate seeing your faces or your little gray boxes. If you have further questions, use the launch page, get on there, ask questions, use each other, practice together, bounce things off of each other, bounce things off of us. The more we can see that in the group, us coaches, the more we can chime in and help as well. And I think it's just really important, especially now, to just lean on that community. We're not bumping into each other in person, so we've got to create those sort of interactions for ourselves. So get on there and just let people know what you're working on. Let's work together, work as a community, support each other. This is a great time to really get your ducks in a row with that stuff and make sure you're not practicing on your clients, but you're practicing in advance, using the resources you have. These resources that you're provided, even just the emails you're getting from Mandy and Lindsay and everybody, are incredible compared to what most other people are getting out there in the real estate world as new agents. So try not to feel overwhelmed. Remember what your why is. Focus on those 5 things. Know that we're here to support you, and know that business is happening right now. Like, get on it. No time to chill out and make banana bread. I mean, if you need that, do that. But there's business right now. Things are happening. So take market share while other people are chilling, and just get through those things so that you have that good base to work off of. It will help you soar. Believe me, once you've got that stuff down, you'll take off. Cool.
Yep.
Thank you.
Have a great week. Thanks
You
for
too.
coming.
Bye.